Perfect. Okay, we'll get started then. So just before 12 o'clock, but thank you for you early join us. So thank you for spending the next hour of your day to join us for this webinar. It's much appreciated. So today, what we'll be looking to do is kind of talk you through the experiences of Transparity and one of our customers, RNIB. For many of our customers, driving inclusive and equal experiences is a top priority. So we'll be discussing how Microsoft 365 Copilot can assist in helping you meet the latest EU accessibility regulation that was launched in June. And as an output from the session, really, we're just looking to come away with strategies to improve accessibility within your organizations, an understanding of the new regulation changes and the impact to your organizations, and then how to leverage AI for different accessibility scenarios, such as customer service and contact center and more. So just before we get kicked off, just some housekeeping really and some accessibility best practice. So for those of you that don't know, there is a magnifier tool option if needed. So just follow the instructions on screen for that. The transcription is already on, so we've enabled the option to turn on captions. We are in PowerPoint Live, so you'll be able to consume this content at your own pace and change the high contrast mode if needed. We'll save time at the end for questions and answers. So if you do bring yourself off mute, please just enable your camera as well, because some people will prefer to lip read, although please mute yourself when not speaking. And just raise your hand if you've got any questions in that Q&A session as well. Obviously, it's for the kind of presenters today, just use your reactions as well to encourage those speakers. So laugh, reacts, and thumbs up would be great from yourselves. And as I said, we'll answer any questions at the end. So please just pop your questions in the chat. Passing over to the agenda then. So we've got Hector joining us here from Microsoft. So Hector is the Accessibility Director at Microsoft. He will be diving into what we're calling the Accessibility Horizon methodology and how you can adopt it. James, one of our sales specialists working with RNIB and other customers at Transparity, will be highlighting our approach to establishing an AI strategy and adopting digital solutions. Jody, our Chief Data and AI Officer, will be joined by the Royal National Institute of Blind People on how they became accessible through adopting their own Copilot solutions with Transparity. And then we'll wrap up with some next steps, which includes our invite to an agent-a-thon as well. Just quickly as well, for some of you that are wondering who Transparity are. So we are uniquely positioned to discuss these topics as the UK's most accredited Microsoft Pure Play partner. So what that means is that Microsoft verify that Transparity are a safe pair of hands, and we work to all of their best practice frameworks, and that specifically unlocks funding for projects across all of their solution areas, but specifically Microsoft 365 Copilot for those interested today. And we are the chosen partner in the UK for accessibility and AI. So we're the only partner to be running, accessibility campaigns like this effectively. So without further ado, I will pass over to you, Hector, to get us started.
Thanks very much, Josh. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining this. I think we can say important webinar. For those of you who don't know me, I lead Microsoft globally on our strategic direction on customer engagement with industries, with our partner networks, to essentially make sure that Microsoft is delivering on the investments that we make on disability inclusion and accessibility more widely. My background, for those who don't know me, is essentially now I have spent 30 years, believe it or not, working with people with disabilities and their technology. In fact, one of my old customers is on the BBC homepage today, showing how her voice has changed now. She's using a different voice for the speech that she lost using AI. And I just sort of reflected on it and thought, that's kind of what this is. People with disabilities are revisiting their use of technology with the new toolkits that are available, with the new tools that are readily available. And we as a society need to really start thinking about how do we make sure we don't leave people with disabilities behind in the experiences that we're delivering in society right now. So yeah, I spent 30 years working with people with disabilities, and I find myself at Microsoft in a very different role, which is just much more about how do we influence industries to do accessibility, and how do we make sure that we focus on the skilling and the education of organizations and people with disabilities in society to leverage the technology that is routinely available. I won't spend too much time on the history, but I think it's always worth kind of thinking, where have we come from? When I started in the 90s working with people with almost like pre-tech tech is sometimes how I describe it. So it wasn't even computers at this point. It was books and access to books and things like this. But all of the tools that people were using for access were functional. They were very much kind of, what's the function you're trying to achieve? And they were specialist. I was literally driving my car around the UK with a boot full or a trunk full of kit to find the solution for somebody with disability, and it was always a bespoke specialist solution that we were building. And what I saw over time, especially certainly as we went into the sort of the tech age, is that more mainstream technology started to arriving. The iPad arrived, and that made a huge difference to the lives of many people with disabilities in terms of the simplicity, the ease of access, the WYSIWYG. Am I allowed to say WYSIWYG? What you see is what you get. The WYSIWYG interfaces suddenly made computing more mainstream, and tech for disability started to move there. And over the last 8 years of my journey here at Microsoft, you've started to see what has AI started to do. So mainstream technology, but embedded with cognitive services. The very captions that you're watching on this call right now, if you've never turned the captions on, turn them on. But when you look at the quality of these captions, there's quite a lot of AI going on there to make these accurate and relevant and usable for people with disabilities. The reason we wanted to kind of bring you together today, though, is this next shift. And I think this is where it starts to get really interesting. We're moving away from the individual responsibilities of finding a solution for somebody with a disability to include or give access. And now we're starting to really start thinking about, what are the industry goals? The tech industry, of course. How does the tech industry become more routinely usable, multimodal, and accessible? And what role is generative AI going to play in that? But then also, what are the specific industry deliverables on disability inclusion? It's no longer, particularly when we start thinking about the regulatory space and the tech space, it's not going to be the responsibility of the laptop provider or the phone provider or the Teams meeting provider or the Zoom call provider to provide the accessibility. There will be an increasing focus on industry requirements, industry deliverables, industry responsibilities. And this is where we really want to help. We take great care of our customers around the world in what they're doing, and particularly as they start to move towards their own AI transformation. And we think there's a huge opportunity to more routinely include accessibility within those strategies. And that's why we're here. We want to share with you how we think about this and the importance of partners like Transparity. I'm going to make sure everyone knows as well that Transparity are a UK disability confident employer. That's important. They're at the table saying we care about disability inclusion. But companies like Transparity and our partners around the globe are sitting down with customers right now, looking at their AI transformation. And the top part of this slide is the mainstream approach. This is really kind of the conversation everyone's having right now. How do we enrich employee experiences? How do we reinvent the way that we engage with our customers? Are we looking at business processes and how we can start using AI to reshape how they work, the usability of all of those internal processes within a business? And then how do we leverage AI to really get innovative and win, and be the best bank or be the best retailer using AI to drive more innovation and unique customer experiences? And that's the mainstream approach. But if you add the disability lens or the accessibility lens to that AI transformation, I think there is huge opportunity for those of you who care about this topic. And I think by the nature of you being on this call, you care about this topic. There is an opportunity to what I would always call weave. Do the weave in. Like don't try and create accessibility as a completely separate program. But if we know that organizations are focusing on these 4 pillars right now, how do we start adding the disability weave into that strategy? So when we think about enriching employee experiences, how are we making sure that those new employee experiences include people with disabilities, proactively include people with disabilities? Are we putting specific focus on skilling employees with disabilities in our organizations to know how to use the modern tech that's going to be part of the standard work experience. And then when we think about customer engagement, now that we have new ways of using AI to adapt customer engagement, find new ways of giving people chatbot experiences, customer service experiences, how are we looking at adding the disability experience, the inclusive design piece in there, thinking about language level, literacy level, people's access to the information, people's access to visual information being described in new ways using AI, all of this suddenly becomes possible. The business application piece there, we're going to get to talk about this in a moment. I'll walk you through all of this, but we're going to start seeing more agents in the workplace. So think of it almost as like a chatbot inside work or an agentic experience inside work. What impact does that have on people with disabilities, where many of those business applications and business processes are legacy? They've been built inaccessible. They've been there for 15, 20 years. How could we start using AI to provide more access to people by adding agentic experiences into them? Think about the accessibility of your SharePoints or your pay slips or your training platforms. Are they accessible? And would you get the budget to go and make them accessible today? Or could we start adding AI and agentic experiences to just add a level or a layer of accessibility across those existing legacy business processes? And then the bit that we always get excited about, and I think probably we spend too much time in the disability space, the magic of innovation. You know, people with disabilities have always been at the forefront of tech in my 30 years. People with disabilities have always been grabbing the latest technology and adding it into their lives and thinking about what they could do to drive new solutions. But is there an opportunity to start thinking about what does the future of accessible healthcare look like for everybody using AI, but bringing the experiences of people who've traditionally been excluded from some of those digital experiences to drive that innovation? This is really the kind of the hope that I would say we have as an accessibility team at Microsoft, is let's not create whole new silos. Let's get involved with what's already happening within businesses and add ourselves into it. And we call this Horizon 1, 2, 3. We think every business or every organization out there can really start to widen its approach to disability inclusion and accessibility. If I look at these three horizons that we talk about, workplace experiences, built environment, and customer deliverables, they're really the three buckets. There's this opportunity to make sure that we don't just focus on one of them. When I think in my 8 years here at Microsoft, I'll go and meet customers and they're really focused on their D&I strategy and inclusion within the workplace, but they don't think further. Or I will go and meet a company who's really focused on their customer deliverables on accessibility, their website or their customer service, but maybe they're not doing such a good job back on their own colleague experiences. The best businesses out there that I have worked with work across all three of these horizons. They build great workplaces, they build great customer experiences, and in between, they have all of the skills and the capabilities to build and test for accessibility. That's really what we should be hoping for here. And within that, there is this red thread, this new red thread of AI, this new opportunity to kind of just start linking the three. Building great workplace experiences leads to building different customer experiences. There's one other piece here that we talk an awful lot about, which is responsible AI. One thing that we're seeing out there is, of course, there's this race to the AI experience across industries. And when people run too quickly on any bit of technology, they tend to exclude people within the experiences. And we know that a lot of already existing AI-driven experiences don't really cater for the experiences of people with disabilities. An easy one to maybe think about is, let's say, something like a fitness application. I jog a little, and I have an app that basically looks at my metrics. It looks at my heart rate. It looks at my, my speed, my pace, my cadence. Does that include disability data? Well, no, not today. And so that unique experience, that new experience, that modern, innovative experience, doesn't include for limb difference potentially, or doesn't include for people of short stature, people with dwarfism. Depending on the language that you prefer to use, it doesn't include that. And if it doesn't include that, then really, is it is it the best product that it could possibly be? So there's a really great opportunity to think about the data that our AI is built on as well. So just to make sure we're covering that. That is a very important live conversation right now across society. But turning back to our horizons, those of you that are on this call likely sit within one of these offices within an organization. So you're either in HR, focused on your workplace experiences, or you might be in your commercial office thinking about your brand experiences and your product experiences. Everybody within an organization has some kind of deliverable on accessibility. And so to help you plan for accessibility with our partners like Transparity, we really want to kind of help you see that if you're building your AI strategy for workplace, then you really want to engage your HR and your IT teams. If you're building for your brand experience, it's really your commercial officer and your branding teams, your marketing teams that we should be thinking about. But in the middle here is this quality or bits of the organization, the technical officers, the financial officers, the legal requirements. All of us play a part in accessibility, and all of us map really quite neatly to what we call the three horizons of accessibility. So look outside of the office you're in today and build your strategy with all of the various departments that you engage with. Okay, let's walk through these and make it a little bit more real for you. In Horizon 1, this is all about the tools that we use. Okay, and hopefully you've been seeing over the last number of years, there's just a lot more in product when you start to use it. More products have a dark mode for better visual experiences. More products are designed with accessibility in mind, and Microsoft products, there's been a lot of work just to make the feature experience richer, more professional, just higher quality than it's ever been before. So we have tools such as dictation mode into devices. We have accessibility checkers that do a much better job on things like color contrast and labeling of images for people using screen readers. Essentially, there's so much more accessibility in products now, and we hope it's becoming more discoverable for people. You don't have to look so hard to find it. There is more accessibility built into the products that we deliver every day that are in the workplace, in Teams, in Office, in Edge. You will find more accessibility. It shouldn't be of a surprise to you. I hope it's not too surprising to you that we're using AI to do other things that maybe you're less aware of. So, for example, the image descriptions in Edge. If you go to a website and there's no image described for a blind person using that website, there's a setting now in Edge where you can turn on and say, actually, even if it's not perfect, I'd like AI to describe it for me and give me some descriptions. That is an option that's routinely now available in a mainstream product. We're using AI to add to accessibility. So when you start this conversation on AI in the workplace, it's already kind of there. Products are using cloud-connected, AI-driven services to drive some accessibility. But as we look forward, we're also looking at this new Copilot age. So I'm sure many of you are already experiencing the use of Copilot in the workplace, either that or using it at home, or hopefully using it on your phones. Something like the Copilot. I'm sure you're using other generative AI services out there as well. But we think there's a real opportunity to put focus on the lives of people with disabilities as these adoption programs happen. So lots of organizations are now looking at how do we adopt Copilot? How do we find the ROI? How do we put it into the workplace? And so we've created a lot of collateral now to show not specific accessibility features, but how do these incredible new technologies that are now available to employees, how do they make a specific difference? And what are the specific things that people with disabilities should be thinking about as they adopt them? So the concept of a day in the life is something that we want to push out there so that people are staying skilled, they're included as part of this adoption. So what I'm showing on screen right now is a day in the life of Vision, this guy, Alex, who's a product manager, and he uses Windows, and he's got those traditional productivity features there, just a reminder that those exist. But then how would somebody who's blind, low vision be using Word in Copilot to brief out a document, or to take information from Outlook in a smarter, quicker, easier way? We move into much more detail in some more of our collateral, and we'll make sure that those of you on this webinar have access to these materials afterwards. But the general point here is being very specific in your rollout of technology to make sure people with disabilities are included. We see that as a big win, because it also gets people with disabilities to understand the role that this AI is playing in their lives. And that gets them thinking about the next two horizons, which we'll cover in a moment. I do want to give a quick nod to neurodiversity. Increasingly in the disability space, we're saying disability and neurodiversity as separate, and we don't see them as separately at Microsoft. We design for all disability, but specifically neurodiversity is being seen as particularly useful when it comes to Copilot. Copilot's being seen as particularly useful for people who are neurodiverse, and it's not surprising. You know, when we think about just the impact spell checker has had on lives of people, but when we think about the organizational benefits, you know, your personal organization benefits of something like Copilot to organize your thoughts, to organize your work, to keep you on schedule. It's exactly how these tools we imagine would be used for everyone, but they have a disproportionate impact on many people who are neurodiverse, dyslexic, autistic. Again, we will be sharing these resources, or actually you can flick back in the content as I move on to come back and look at some of this. But there is huge benefit, disproportionate benefit to many people who are neurodiverse of accessibility, and the studies are in about this. We're getting this feedback from the communities involved to share this. This also creates more of a kind of a wider group of people when companies are thinking about their D&I efforts, their productivity efforts, their employee benefits of something like Copilot. So it's definitely worth adding it into your strategy. As we move into this Horizon 2, though, I think people are increasingly familiar with these workplace tools and what's available, but maybe what they're not quite thinking about now is this addition of agents in the workplace. And this is where I really want people with disabilities particularly to get involved and to start thinking about what agent would I build in the workplace to support me in my job, or what agent would I benefit from having within the workplace. And one that we've built inside Microsoft that I want to just share with you is our own accommodations process agent or workplace guidance agent. If you think about disability in the workplace, I'm going to borrow a word from Scope, the organisation in the UK. Some of these conversations can be awkward around disability, awkward for the employee, awkward for the manager, to be thinking about how do I support my employee who's shared this disability with me. And so now we're using agentic technology to ease people into that conversation and to direct them to the resources that already existed before, but are now more discoverable with agentic technology. This is a really nice approach in terms of just getting people to think about a specific tool that they would build within the workplace, directing you to resources, helping people have confident private conversations with an agent about topics that might be difficult to have face-to-face conversations about sometimes, particularly depending on the nervousness of the individuals involved. So this is an example of adding agentic technology, but just see it as one. What agents are able to do nowadays is take pre-existing inaccessible experiences and then add an AI layer to make some of those experiences more accessible, more usable. And I think this will be the story that we start to tell more and more so as we look ahead. Okay, to make sure I keep to time. Horizon 3 is about innovation, and we've hopefully you kind of understand where we're going with this. But companies are already around the world adding things like live captions to their experiences, their media telco experiences, or Peloton, for example, here in gym equipment now has generated captions, AI generated captions. Chatbots are being built with more accessibility in mind. Image descriptions are so much easier, and we've seen companies do some interesting work there as well. But we want you to start thinking about this. How do we add these layers of multimodal technology into these industry experiences? And our example here that we give is our own tech support desk. So you are now able to come to Microsoft for disability support and have a generative AI conversation with us around your challenges, something not working out the box, a compatibility issue. This is really upping our customer satisfaction and is allowing our specialists on disability and accessibility to really go deep with our customers who need more support. So it's just one example of, we think, how organizations will start to innovate some of their processes. Okay, desperate to keep to time. Calls to action. Let's move on to this. So there are various calls to action that we want to make to specifically to communities out there. If you're a person with a disability, I think you really have to jump on to AI as a skills agenda. And so we've released a training course. Robin, who's going to speak with you later for RNIB, is already one of my instructors. But essentially, we want to share the best experiences of people with disabilities who are already embracing AI at work and how they're embedding it in their work processes and how they're staying skilled and relevant in the workplace. I think this is, or in the jobs market, I think that's a really important thing. We need to maintain the representation of people with disabilities in this AI age. And then secondly, we've published some white papers. All too often, people are hearing from us talk about accessible technology, but it's harder for organizations to apply it to their own industry. And so through Transparency, one of the first partners to get these from me, we've published these 5 white papers that allow you to have a specific conversation about transport, government services, media telco, retail, and there's one more, banking. So essentially we're telling the story of what accessibility means in those industries and giving examples of what people are doing there. So please take this collateral as well and maybe share it in your own industries to drive awareness about what could happen, what change you would like to see in your industries. The regulators are obviously going to be an important part of this AI transformation. And the European Accessibility Act went live in June. And it puts specific requirements on specific industries, which is why I've published these white papers now, because what we're now seeing is a greater demand on organizations in specific sectors to think about their digital accessibility, not just their websites. This is their applications, their services, their products, their hardware is included. So think about things like ATMs, ticket machines, point of sale systems. We're seeing a much higher demand with specific legal requirements on digital accessibility going out across Europe. And in order for us to be able to do that, we're going to need 2 things to happen. Or if we're going to build that more accessible world with and satisfy the needs of the regulators, quite rightly, we're going to need core technologies, core understanding of what people need, but then we're also going to need partners that can go and build this collateral with you. And this is why the Microsoft Partner Network are going to be so important. This won't be organizations who are kind of reinventing it for the first time themselves. This will be much more about partners like Transparency who've done it already with some companies, helping organizations with their journey to drive that accessibility out. I'm going to miss the video just because of time, but maybe if we get time, we can show it later, Team Transparency. I'll just jump across. This partnership is really what we're looking about. You know, we look after 6,000 products at Microsoft to make sure that we are accessible. But the disability community, employees out there sharing their own experiences, customers and partners are going to be the ones that make the real difference. And so with that, enough from me. I'm going to pass back to James to tell you more about the work that Transparency are doing. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Hector. Really, really interesting. For those that don't know me, my name's James. I'm a sales specialist here at Transparency. I've been in the commercial tech space for about 15 years now, including a fairly significant stint in nonprofit and advocacy. And so it's a particular area that I'm quite passionate about. What I wanted to sort of move into today and give you a little bit of insight into, and I won't take too much of your time because I really want you to hear from Robin and some lived experience with the excellent work we've been doing in RNIB. But a lot of our customers are asking us, that's great, we love AI, we love accessibility. How do we actualize this through a shift from more tactical to strategic engagement within our organization, and really touching on what Hector described earlier with 3 horizon thinking. So I'm going to give you a little bit of insight today into what we do as an organization. And I'll touch just very briefly to extend. Ultimately, Josh talked a little bit about it at the start, but we're an organization that have been in business for 10 years now, and all we do is deliver digital transformation on the Microsoft Cloud. So if you're a customer that believes in AI, in Microsoft Cloud, and in accessibility, we're here to help you leverage that into a real actualized journey, and more than anything, outcomes that deliver things for your business and your users. The way we do that is fundamentally through a 3-pillared approach that we refer to as discover, design, and deliver, with some wraparound there from our executive team, from our program and architectural team, consistent, great communication and a really, really deep technical skill set that helps you map your business requirements to real world outcomes. The way we start doing that, and why I think this is particularly important to accessibility, and Hector touched on this a little bit earlier, is that good accessibility and good tech strategy are interlinked in that if we make them one and the same and we listen to our users, it's very difficult to remove them from your strategy. So rather than trying to look at accessibility as something separate from user requirements, it's very important that we look at it as one and the same. So the first thing we do is work with organizations to understand the key themes around their business and also with their customers. And the reason that's really important is the only way we deliver good solutions that provide the outcomes that people want, whether that be new capability, innovation, or accessibility, is that we actually listen to what people need. And it doesn't matter whether that's accessibility or a general requirement across the business. So first of all, we work together to understand those. And these are some examples here, but there could be a plethora of different themes depending on the organization or the industry that you work within. What we then do is we move through to linking those into a business sense so that they are relatable for people that maybe don't have the same challenges as you. So this is tying it to things like business performance, employee experience, service improvement, or maybe your risk profile as an organization. So again, tying to that point that I say there around making it very difficult for this to be an overlooked topic. I think one of the mistakes we quite often look at in the accessibility space is seeing it, as Hector mentioned, as an entirely separate activity. And it's very easy for maybe people who aren't as well intentioned to just pull that out of their digital strategy and not see how it might benefit their organization regardless. We then typically move in with customers to deliver early value. And one of the reasons we do that is to validate our thinking. But it's also that the community of people that we work in will help us to iterate in an agile manner on our digital transformation strategy. So rather than trying to spend a huge amount of time defining what it is that we're going to deliver, we start by giving back to that community early. And a great one, as Hector's talked about today, is releasing AI and agentic tools to the user base to give back to them as quickly as possible. But there's a whole host of other examples on here as well. Ultimately, we then work with organizations to bring our experience to assess what solutions are available in the market. And then that may include understanding what features are available more generally, but also what features are available to make accommodations for users. The key thing here is it's very difficult to make the right decisions if you don't understand what's available. So we can help you to guide you on that journey. And then naturally, we then look to down select the best fit through the conversations we have. And that may be a combination of tools because it may not be one size fits all. And then finally, we use our deep technical expertise to design for the complexity of your organization. So that may be environmental concerns. And by that, I mean your current technical estate and where you are today. But it also might be things like cultural or accessibility needs that we need to take into account as we embark on that journey. And then exactly as Hector touched on earlier, we then move into mapping that into more horizon-based thinking. Now, obviously, because of customer concerns, these are examples on the slides that you see in front of you here. But if we worked with an organization like yourselves, this is effectively the process that we would go through here. And the most important thing I'd like to point out here is that this is defined by us and our customers working together. So you ultimately dictate to us through the advocacy we do and the conversations we have within your organization how the importance lands to you. So these items could land anywhere on this horizon based on the ultimate business value they provide and then the effort that it takes to implement them. And we do this over 3 horizons, just as Hector described earlier with the AI journey. And typically, the way we then embark on a delivery mechanism for that is a product that we like to call Wayfinder. And it's effectively an agile engagement that acknowledges that a multi-year tech transformation strategy is no longer something we embark on in isolation, and it will change as it moves forward because your business will find new requirements. You may come under new regulation, as we've discussed today, but equally, the industry is just moving so fast that you need to have an element of agility in there. So this is why we define lower level waymarks within the program and then key high level milestones for that delivery mechanism. And it also, as an aside from that, gives quite a nice commercial mechanism around there so that you know that your investment is safe. And I suppose the final message that I'd like to say, as with accessibility and digital transformation together, this is not a singular activity. What we really want to try and encourage you to do here is to shift from more of a tactical approach to transformation and into a more strategic one. And that's something that I'm particularly passionate about. And the way that we do that is by making sure that we document the success that we've had in the engagement, because perception is really important. It's very difficult to springboard into a future engagement if the perception within your business is that your transformation has been a failure. And that might not even be true. It might just be that, PR is very important, and we may need to take a look under the hood to understand exactly what we've done. We then look to refine the approach, because I don't think anybody would ever be surprised if they've worked in tech for a while that not everything always goes to plan. So we need to understand what hasn't gone the way we wanted it to, so that we can avoid that again in the future. And then finally, as I say, this is not a sort of one-off activity. So we would want to look at understanding those, applying them to our next multi-year horizon, and then repeating this process and moving forward, taking into account any changes that have been had there. So that's just a little bit of a view into the approach that we can take there. And obviously this is very much able to be refined to individual needs, both from sort of cultural accessibility and industry perspective. So I won't take up too much more time, but I'd like to just say thank you very much for listening to me today, and I will hand over to Robin and Jodie, who are going to talk about some of the lived experience and some of the great work we've done with RNIB. So guys, thanks so much.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. And thanks to everyone again for joining. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jodie Ashwood, previously Rogers. I'm getting used to the name change still after getting married over the last couple of weeks. But I'm the Chief Data and AI Officer here at Transparity, where I'm responsible for our data and AI business. And I'm absolutely thrilled today to be joined by Robin from RNIB, and we're going to be getting his perspective on a lot of the topics that we've discussed today. So Robin, if you don't mind, do you want to just introduce yourself, your background, and your role at RNIB?
Yeah, sure. Great to be with you all. So I'm Robin Spinks. I'm Head of Inclusive Design at RNIB, and I am registered severely sight impaired. And what that means in practice is that I can see the top letter on the eye test chart when you go to the opticians. I'm told there are other letters, I just can't see them, but I've grown up and gone to school, college, university with that level of low vision. So essentially it's 6/60 or registered severely visually impaired. I've worked and travelled in 37 different countries around the world, often in quite hostile environments. And as someone with a disability, that's kind of required me to deal with lots of challenges. So career initially in career guidance and education, and then moved into international development. And that led me to a career with the tech industry and to where I work today at RNIB. So it's a great privilege to lead a team of design specialists and usability specialists, and also people who specialize in products and just dealing with breakthroughs and problem solving. Team spread right across the country, and it's a real privilege to work with them and to be joining you here today.
And thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. And I had the privilege of attending RNIB's Inclusive Design for Sustainability conference in Glasgow back in March of this year. And we've touched on, I guess, the concept of inclusive design through Hector's presentation. But for those who haven't kind of come across this concept before, are you able to help to just kind of bring that to life for us through some practical examples in terms of, where you have seen this working well and where you've seen this kind of being an afterthought? And Hector did touch on some of this with the kind of physical ATMs and payment systems. But yeah, it'd be great to get your kind of perspective on what is inclusive design and why is it so important?
Yeah, building on Hector's examples, if you want to think about an environment that's as free of barriers as it can be, so whether you've got a visual impairment, hearing impairment, mobility issues, neurodiversity, think about how we can strip away barriers and create a great experience that's as equitable as it can be. And that's not a one-hit wonder. That's very much about a process, but also a mindset that's about constantly challenging, constantly saying, what would it be like if we were to access this product or service as a person with hearing impairment or as someone with dyslexia? So great example of things that work well. We do a lot of work with major consumer electronics brands. So I'm going to pick out here Samsung. So many people in the audience might have a Samsung TV, a smart TV at home. And if you were to look in the menus, particularly the accessibility menus, you would see lots of evidence of the work that RNIB has done with Samsung. And this is about creating workarounds for accessibility challenges. So building a screen reader that's fit for purpose into the product, screen magnification, also leveraging AI to do things like Relumino, which is a service that allows a more robust outline around images that are dynamic on screen. So those are just a few examples. That's something that works well, and it's a great relationship that continues to flourish. If we want to think about something that doesn't work well, many of us can remember maybe going out to a restaurant for dinner and being ready to pay the bill, and you're handed a device that has rubbery plastic keys on it. That's great, because if you're visually impaired like me, you can memorize where the keys are, you've got the tactility, you can feel them. That whole landscape is changing drastically and really quickly. What's coming in place of the traditional chip and pin machines is what we call pin on glass. And that's where you get handed a tablet-like device that's got a dynamic display. It's maybe constantly refreshing. It might offer you the chance to sign up for membership information. It might offer you the chance to join a loyalty program. And then eventually it'll allow you to pay the bill, which is the thing you want to do. But, you know, it's a touchscreen based device. It's dynamic. What we're seeing there is a huge range of approaches from companies who build those devices. Some of them really troublesome, so you absolutely need eyesight to be able to use those devices. So if you're a blind person out for dinner, or maybe you're out on a date taking someone out for dinner, what you want to do is just basically quite discreetly maybe pay the bill, for example. It's harder for you to do it now because of the touchscreen technology that's appearing on pin on glass. So that's a real challenge that we're hugely involved with right now. We've worked with more than 50 different companies that build payment terminals. We're also working closely with UK Finance, but that's a really good example of where it's not working well right now. But watch this space, because we hope that there's a lot of positivity out there. But you know, we've got significant hurdles to get across, and we will get there. I think a lot of RNIB's work in industry has been problem solving and how to get around the accessibility challenges, not just for blind people, I might add. So we're obviously specialists in sight loss, but clearly the legislation is pan disability. So we need to think in a much more holistic way. And I think it really speaks to that third point, that third horizon that Hector talked about. It's about thinking about that future. How do you change? How do you mold what you're doing to better meet that future and the needs of your future customers? 2 million people in the UK today who are blind or partially sighted. By 2050, there will be 4 million. It's a growing audience and a growing community. So, you know, investment in accessibility and inclusion is a great investment.
Yeah, and I think having that diversity in those teams that are doing the requirements gathering, the discovery, the design, and those kind of user focus groups, right? So it's not an afterthought, but like Hector said, like making sure it's weaved in kind of by design, and touching on that kind of importance of having a plan and you know, the 3 horizon methodology. I guess, Robin, what is your perspective in terms of how technology can help level the playing field? But I guess more importantly, what is the skills enablement that's kind of really needed to be done by employers for that to be able to happen? I think we'll get into the kind of work we've done together around Copilot shortly, but we've seen that's really enabled, you know, capacity to be built into organizations really in terms of that employee productivity, giving back some time to focus on some of these higher value activities around reimagining processes so that they are kind of more inclusive, more accessible, more intelligent. I guess, yeah, what's your perspective on how technology can help in those skills development plans that are kind of needed to be in place?
I think the key is in a word that both James and Hector used. It's the word discovery. And actually for us as an organization, but also for me as an individual, this has been about a constant voyage of discovery. So a new feature becomes available. What can that do? What experience might that enable for someone like me? And I remember going back to the start of this process and just even thinking about having Copilot, for example, summarize a document or a long email. And some people, let's be honest, will send emails that are longer perhaps than they need to be. Yeah. Having that summarized was just fantastic, having it read out, having things basically made more clear, crystallized, summarized for me, but also allowing the technology to help me to create content, to build narrative, to build slides. So, there's a huge range of micro level tasks that can be made easier. And I think discovery is the mindset that we all need to adopt here. So I think, as human beings, we're incredibly good at doing the things that we've always done. But there's an old saying that says that if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And I honestly think that's incredibly relevant and powerful for people to think about in the age of AI. And actually, Hector outlined that really well in terms of there are new opportunities to do things in ways that we've not traditionally done them. Yeah. And sometimes people fear change. And that's particularly true, I think, for some of the people that we've worked with who want to do things in a certain way. I'm a lover of technology. So from a very, very early age, I became utterly convinced that you can live a better, more productive, and happier life if you open your arms and grasp technology. And I will defend that statement. It's got to be done at a level that's right for the person. So here's maybe the critical other word here is personalization. Let's think about an on-ramp that is actually relevant and timely and manageable and sensitive for the individuals and the teams concerned, because they're all going to be different, right? Some people are going to take to it like a duck to water, and other people are going to push back. And even within our organization, I remember conversations in the early days being about, ethics and responsible AI, great conversations, and absolutely conversations that we should all be having. But let's not let those conversations automatically take precedence over the conversation that says, how can we move closer to what we ultimately want to be? How can we empower people to be more proficient, to be more productive? But also, do you know what? To feel like when they leave work at the end of the day, they've had a better day, they've had a more productive day. Some of the heavy lifting has been taken away and it's been smoothed, and it's enabled, us as humans to do that clever bit that we can do, that thinking, that rationalizing, that, dealing with challenges and problem situations. Let the tech do the lifting that it can do easily and reliably for us, and let's do the human bit in the best way that we can. And that for me, I think discovery and personalization are absolutely critical here.
Perfect, thank you. And I think there's probably a few people on the call who haven't seen the kind of partnership that we've had together around your Copilot deployment and adoption journey. So I'm just going to play a short video to bring this to life, because I think you'll see that AD and Trisha do this a lot more justice than I would be able to do. So I'm going to click play on the video, and then Robin, it would be great just to touch on kind of your experience of the partnership, and also kind of, I guess, any top tips that you would have for other people on this call or organizations that are looking to get started on this kind of AI journey around accessibility. So let me click play now. Hopefully it's going to come through. Also, it's terrible to see yourself on video, and I'm sure James will agree. But I think spending the day with AD and the team was just, it's like so inspiring. And I think you've seen a ton of impact from the kind of AI journey that you've been on with at RNIB so far. And I guess I just wanted to get your thoughts around, how you would, the advice you would give to other organizations, Robin, I guess, in terms of getting started.
Yeah, well, I started using Copilot around about the same time that I started running. And actually, there are lots of parallels, because the first thing is that you need to be incremental. So you can't start running and then go straight for the London Marathon. It took me a couple of years to get to that stage. But, take it in bite-sized chunks. Don't be hesitant. Be positive about it and take a little chunk and see how you get on. Maybe even allocate a bit of time just with your team to do some demos when the team are together. And when you start to get the responses and the reactions from people, that's really interesting when you can see and hear that in the room together. And gradually what you begin to notice is that the confidence level builds up And people who are more confident and people who love it, like me, they're actually encouraging the people who are less positive on that journey. And it's important that that happens at a time and at a pace that works for the individuals. So be incremental with it, but I think also be really aware of what the opportunities are in terms of productivity. You've got the chance to get Copilot to do stuff that might be tedious or laborious. You can get Copilot to do that in the background for you, and it can actually make a real difference. It will make a difference to the way that you feel about your work and the way that you feel about being at work. So build that confidence in an incremental way. I think also let's have an open and honest conversation with the people who are hesitant or perhaps reluctant to get involved, and enable, you know, sharing. So I just think peer reviewing and sharing in the workplace of thoughts and ideas, that will help to kind of move people along. I think also what's great is to even watch someone doing stuff with Copilot. You know, the word magic was used, and it's not an understatement. I think it sometimes does feel like that. Actually watching things happen with Copilot, but also think about the opportunity to create a more equitable playing field for everybody. You know, there will be people in the teams that you manage who genuinely like writing. So I like writing. I don't mind sitting down and creating and composing. But I know lots of people who don't like it and who find it quite stressful. And I often wonder, maybe if you had Copilot as your companion, that feeling would become much more positive for the individual. I've seen that happen. So I think be incremental, be responsive. Let's have honest and open conversations with employees about it. But you know what? Let's keep an eye on the future. Where do we want to be? What are our competitors doing as an organization? Because if you're not using AI, your competitors certainly are. So, you know, how do you adjust and move forward in the workplace and in your individual workplace journey in a way that's manageable for you? So the running journey wasn't dissimilar. I started with Couch to 5K, and then, you know, a couple of years later, I ran the London Marathon at the end of April this year. And, you know, 3 years ago, if someone said, do you think that you would have been able to do that? I'd have said, absolutely no way. But you've got to look at that longer term span, and you've got to think about that third horizon, right? That ultimate goal that you want to get to. How do you get there? You're going to do it in little chunks. It's going to be incremental. You're going to feel a sense of momentum and aggregation. If it's an enormous leap, then maybe what you need to do is just pace yourself a little bit more. So yeah, be incremental, be positive, be open and honest, and focus on that horizon.
I love that. Some really powerful advice there. And I think it's Couch to 5K is almost the kind of co-pilot assistant to the running journey. And I take my hat off to you, because I've been stuck on week 1 for a very long time. I don't want to admit how long. But yeah, I think some great advice, and we see a lot of this in terms of, you know, supporting employees with really upskilling and feeling comfortable. And it takes a long time, right, to create a new habit, to introduce a new way of working. So I think it's, you know, making sure you've got that reinforcement learning, and that's where that kind of skilling piece comes back. And then we also see the advocacy, creating that champions network, and sharing best practices with tools like Prompt Buddy really do kind of drive that wider adoption, to make sure everyone is getting the most out of the tools that they've been provided with. And conscious of time, but I think it would be remiss of me not to kind of get your opinion on the EU Accessibility Act. And, you know, is this kind of, you know, do you really welcome this legislation? And is there any advice for businesses, I guess, that are looking to ensure they're complying with this and maybe feeling that it's quite overwhelming? Is that advice, I guess, around getting started, taking an iterative approach? Is that kind of the same for this as well?
I think the EAA is really welcome, you know, and there's a phrase that's used in there, POUR, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And actually, when you take the EAA and look at what it's trying to do, if you ask yourself, you know, to what extent is a product or service conforming to that principle of POUR, that's a really helpful self-analysis that you can do. What you can also do is engage with organizations like RNIB. We're working with lots of companies on How do you become better prepared for EAA? How do you deal with the challenges and obstacles that you know about? And how do you resolve those accessibility challenges in a systematic way? So you won't resolve them all overnight, but actually if you've got a 6-month, 12-month, 2-year, 3-year plan to actually resolve specific deep-rooted challenges that you face, then you're on that journey. And actually what's powerful about that is you can demonstrate to anyone who might ask that you're on that journey. It's not an overnight change. It's about ultimately moving towards a scenario where all of your hardware, software, and services products are as equitable as they possibly can be, and that journey continues, that it becomes a behavior and a habit in your company to actually constantly create better and more improved products and services as you move forward.
Perfect. And I think, yeah, it just demonstrates the importance again of that kind of 3-horizon methodology planning. So conscious of time, I think, sorry, that's sadly all we've got time for today, but please do use the chat to ask any questions. And Robin, just a huge thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule and sharing so many great insights with us today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. We've never had a better toolkit at our disposal.
Thanks, Robin.
Brilliant.
Over to you, Josh.
Absolutely love the running analogy as well. I'm in the pain of that at the moment, Robin. So yeah, it's good to hear that you came out the other side. But yeah, just to reiterate, thank you to Robin and Hector and Jodie and James for the content today, and everyone else that's joined the session. We really appreciate your time. So next up for Transparency and Microsoft is our Agent-a-thon. You'll see a link at the bottom left of the screen there to sign up now. Probably best to just quickly do that, reserve your space, because they are limited. Effectively, the Agent-a-thon is your opportunity to take everything you've learned about AI agents and accessibility and put it into practice. So you have the ability to collaborate with Microsoft and Transparency and industry experts and really get hands-on experience of building these solutions to address your challenges. During the session, really, we'll be breaking it out into 5 specific areas. So one will be accessibility. Hector will be joining us for the day as well, so you can meet him and talk all things accessibility. Also discussing bid management, customer service, back office operations, and contact center operations. And really beyond that, it's the opportunity really to ideate and design agents that could transform your organization. And you'll see live demos as well of these solutions working in practice. You'll hear from experts, and we'll be talking specifics around such as the researcher and analyst capabilities within M365. And there will be a prize at the end of the day as well for the best AI agent. So yeah, please do sign up at the link there. As Jodie said, please pop your questions in the chat. We'll try and get back to you individually in the chat after the session. And yeah, we'd love to take you through your kind of next steps of the AI journey. So please reach out to us afterwards if you'd like to. Thank you.